Hello and welcome to Sound Financial Bites. My name is Paul Adams, and I've got to tell you, I am really jazzed up about the conversation we're going to have today. But first, I want to have a little bit of a preliminary conversation before we get into the topic today. That preliminary conversation is how hard it was to pull off this morning's podcast. Absolutely plagued by technical difficulties trying to launch it today. I had to be my own producer today. I was in a position where I had one piece of technology fail after another. And more than once, I thought to myself, maybe we don't need to get one out this week. Now, why do I even share that with you? It's not because I want anybody to feel bad for my woes as a business owner, as a podcaster. All of you out there that are entrepreneurs and business owners know what it's like to bump into these things. But here's the thing I see people do a lot with their money is that they look around the marketplace and it's like, well, nobody seems to have a philosophy I can connect with. Nobody seems to be able to take really good care of me and my family or our future. And they just throw up their arms and they're done with it. Like I almost was this morning attempting to record this podcast. And here's my encouragement for you. All I want to do is encourage everyone listening that what you would be able to do is simply reflect on the fact that there is a philosophy out there. Maybe it's ours, maybe it's somebody else's. But what you don't want to do is just give up. You don't want to unplug. The stakes are too high. Your money and your financial future are way too important for you to be in a position where what you would do is chalk it up to luck, chalk it up to destiny. Or as the old Latin or Greek saying, Dios ex machina, that the God out of the sky will save you from your financial woes in your future. We borrow to deal with many financial issues today, but nobody will give you a loan in your old age to pay for all the important things that are necessary. So you see, the stakes are too high. You can't take the risk of not having a solution. And so not that much different than me dealing with the technical difficulties, pushing through, trying another solution until I could get to the place that I could deliver this podcast today. I want you to be able to deliver on the future that both your younger self will have expected of you and that your family, your children, that your friends would expect that you'd be able to spend the future with them, being able to at least be sufficient. I'm not talking about being ultra wealthy, although you might be one of those people. More importantly, just don't give up. Keep pushing on until you find somebody's philosophy. As I think all of our podcast listeners know, we're available for a short introductory call. Corey or myself are happy to take some time with you to just see where you're at, see if we can answer any questions and get you going in the right direction. We're okay if that's not with us. Okay, let's get to today's topic. We're going to talk a little bit about something we've not covered in some time, and that's the concept of the wealth coordination account. And the wealth coordination account is not just a tool or an account to put money in. It's actually an overlay to shield us from many of the problems that are naturally occurring out in the marketplace as it relates to the way that we think about money. We often don't realize how hardwired we've become as it relates to dealing with our finances. So for those of you that are listening on the podcast, we're going to have a download for you that will be a PDF of these same slides that I'm going to talk through. For those of you on YouTube, you've got it all right here, and yet it may make sense to go to the podcast, get the download, and just revisit it. Maybe listen to it once or twice or listen to it with your spouse. This is a game-changing conversation. For nearly the last 20 years, this has been the centerpiece of what we teach our clients when they engage to help them be able to push back on that common sense way of thinking that people have about money. So let's jump into it. When we're thinking about money and our finances, too often people have an inappropriate interpretation around savings. So if I ask a huge room full of people, what is it most people sometimes do with their savings? What's the answer? The answer that almost inevitably comes back, at least from people that are raised in America, we get different answers from our clients that are first generation in the United States. But if you have been raised in America, that answer is almost always spend it. Spend it. Savings gets spent. And we have to wonder, what is it that causes this? Now, I was speaking at an event in January of 2007 at this amazing venue in Ojai, California. And some amazing people, about 130 people were in the room at this business conference. They'd asked me to come and speak about how big of a deal it is that one day you've got to step off into having enough money because one day your offer just won't be as valuable in the marketplace. We don't get to choose. The people joke about, well, I guess I just got to work until I'm 80. We don't get that choice. The marketplace will make that choice for us. So when you walk around that room and you see all these people whose everybody's interpretation, the way we've been taught, what do most people sometimes do with their savings is spend it. Well, that's pretty strange. Why would we say that? And at that conference, I had taken a nice long walk and I walked by a Chase Bank. I'm going to show you some actual pictures I took from inside the bank. Now, this is a woman sitting there ready to drink her coffee. She looks resolved, engaged, focused. And this is my year to start saving more. And I thought to myself, I'm about to go on stage tomorrow. I'm going to talk about how these financial institutions have changed the way we think about money inappropriately and ineffectively for our future. Maybe they've changed. So I kind of snapped a picture of that. And then I walked into the bank branch and people were still there that evening. And I saw some more signs that made me more resolute about the importance of things that we teach our clients. And it said, what are people saving for? Well, 38% are saving for travel, 24% for a home, in case I want to spend it on travel or spend it on a home. Curious? And then 56% saving for an emergency, in case they got to spend it for an emergency. Other signs that were on the wall were 29% may want to save for a car. And for those of you listening, these are cute little infographics. These are signs are, 2.5 feet by 3 feet, big signs. 29% saving for a car, 23% saving for a child's college education, both spending decisions. Last but not least, 26% saving for home improvements. Now, here's the challenge. The thing I want us all to think about is, why do the banks teach us to spend our money? Well, I had a chance to have a conversation with a CEO of a very, very, very large bank. And we had a deep and just amazing conversation about the way that he does care deeply about all of the people that are customers of his bank, and that they want them to save more. They want them to be more responsible, all of that. And I mean, this guy is one of the most authentic men I've met in a long time. And I believe him. And he said, you know what the thing is that's tough for me? Is that the only way we can be profitable is if people borrow. So despite the fact that we want them to be more financially sufficient, we want them to take better care of their money, as a bank, our biggest revenue source is lending. Now think about that for a moment. A bank can't make money unless they lend money to somebody else and earn that interest. That's how they give us interest on a CD or a savings account or a checking account or pay for all of the branches. They can't do that. They can't just give us money unless they have somebody else to lend it to. So they have to kind of encourage, even if it's subliminally them, not like there's some grand design behind it, but they need to encourage us to spend. And I would have all of us really watch that when we're interacting with our banks, is that they have an interest in our money being on the move and in consumption, so that we borrow more, either for emergencies or any of those things I just mentioned, or that we would take our savings periodically and spend it so that money stays in motion and we go out and borrow more. So what people try to do typically to combat this, to fight against it, to try to have some semblance of financial responsibility underneath this current of the way that people deal with money, and clearly it's not leading to people having a lot of financial success on the whole, what do? Well, they try to budget. And when people try to budget, what they don't think about is what they're focusing on. Now, for those of you that have ever been in a position where what you've done is tried to teach a 16-year-old how to drive, and you tell them to focus on something, maybe unintentionally, you're like, hey, watch the curb, watch the curb, watch the curb, don't hit the curb. And they hit it every time. Why? Because we put their attention on the curb. Now, what happens with budgeting? Well, budgeting in its traditional sense, it deals with, it focuses on and solely on spending. It focuses totally on spending. Spending is the catalyst. And what's left over after the spending is what? What's left over after the spending is what you save. It's residual. It's left over. It's the residue in that transaction. And that doesn't work. As you can see behind me, this is one of the most popular budgeting spreadsheets available on the internet. And it's my income minus my expenses equals my net. And that's the amount I can save. We need to get as far away from that as possible because that is what everybody's doing. And no wonder we have such a low savings rate in this country. Now, you'll hear in a minute that I don't love the term savings rate because it keeps us trapped inside that cycle of setting aside money and spending it. Okay. Savings equals spending to most of us as Americans deep in our psyche. Let's not try to cure that. Let's just change our language. I'll come to that in a moment. What we want to do instead is focus on wealth building. And so let me share this with you on screen here briefly. You're going to see how we look at this. The residual, the default way people think about money, my income minus my expenses equals savings. What we want to do is make the amount of money we set aside to asset building, make that the catalyst, make that catalytic, make that the thing that when we drop it into our financial life, it begins to shift the way that we think about money. Then income, asset building, and guess what? We manage to live on what's left. If you want to test this for a moment, think for a moment about the times that you have had unexpected expenses that you didn't anticipate. Transmission goes out on a car, medical expenses, whatever they are. Well, for those of you listening, you probably never missed a meal and you probably never missed a payment on anything, even those times when things were unexpected. And let me share with you, had you first set aside money toward asset building, you still would have paid all your bills. Now, here's kind of the bigger issue though. And that is that where are you going to put it? You see, every financial person that I know, the way I was originally trained in this industry by the financial institutions on how to sell clients was get them putting money in directly with you. And I remember going back, now this is again, nearly 2 decades, that I decided I'm not going to do that because people need to put money aside in assets and all the assets somebody might acquire, real estate, business ownership. Maybe they're going to do first trust deed lending outside of their relationship with me directly. I need to give them a platform from which they could do that, but they can separate it from their savings. They can separate it from the rest of their accounts. And this concept I'm about to share with you is so powerful. I actually had somebody reach out to me who had met with me 16 years prior. And this was just last year, reached out to me, let me know I'm retiring. And what I'm going to do is I am going to go help people coach them on their money. And the centerpiece of the work I'm going to do is this idea that I'm going to show all of you called the wealth coordination account. I'm going to make that the centerpiece of everything I teach people because it served me so well. He and I just lost communication and just really rekindled a friendship. It was such a blessing. But I want to share with all of you what you can do today to change the way you flow your money through your household and put yourself in a better position to take better care of your financial future. I hope you're ready for this. Let's do it. So here's kind of a normal couple, okay? They're very cute and well-dressed. They clearly have good taste in clothing and furniture, and they also have a pretty good household income. They make about $400,000 a year. Now, by making that $400,000 a year, what they've decided to do is follow certain rules that we teach our clients. Number one, the first purpose of having this wealth coordination account is that it needs to be the first financial commitment each month. Now, if you are somebody of deep religious faith, if giving to your church is important to you like it is to me, that should be the very first, okay? So this would be the 1.1 is the money you set aside to your wealth coordination account, okay? Big deal. We need to make sure the whole thing of like pay yourself first is like, I don't know why that doesn't work. That doesn't work for people. But what I will share with you and Jeff Miller, who's recently joined our firm, who you're going to hear from on the podcast, something his grandfather told him was, don't brag to me to how much you make. Tell me how much you save. That's impressive. Tell me how much you save. So first one, it gets in there. The money gets in the wealth coordination account. One-way check valve doesn't come back out to buy liabilities. It only comes out to buy assets. That's purpose 2. It buys assets. And then purpose 3 is that once it goes out to buy an asset, once that asset is profitable, the profit has to be driven back to the wealth coordination account and then we can redeploy it elsewhere. I'm going to explain that in just a moment. But we need to first talk about what is an asset. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket now or has the ability to put money in your pocket in the future without changing your lifestyle. Let me say that again. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket now or has the ability to put money in your pocket in the future without changing your lifestyle. Now think about that. That means lots of things we might consider to be an asset are not. Like our primary residence is not an asset under that definition. An RV is not an asset. Now, people are lending us money. It's an asset to them on their balance sheet as collateral for our loan. But it's not our asset because even if we move and change homes, that's a change in lifestyle. And then that new asset we put on our balance sheet once we've embraced the change in lifestyle, that's the asset. So let's talk about how this works in real world operation. So this household is setting aside 20% of their gross income. It's a great start. They're setting aside $80,000 a year. Now, the one asset you might acquire, 401ks, like out of your paycheck, you may not be able to make from the wealth coordination account. The key is separate checking account. You could go set it up today on your way home from work during this commute where you're listening to me right now. Swing by the bank, set up a free checking account, drop this in. You can drop money into it right now. It becomes your first monthly commitment. This family setting aside 20%. And they go out and buy assets. Now, you'll notice I just put a vacation home in, but I said your primary residence, not an asset. Because a vacation home can be rented when you're not there. You don't have your clothes in the closet. You don't have an extra car in the garage. That's a secondary residence. This is an investment property vacation home. That could be an asset. Of course, you can have collectibles. You could have, if they're not part of your lifestyle, like the collectible car, as long as you're not in the collectible Corvette club with your Corvette friends and your Corvette coffee. That makes it part of lifestyle, no longer counts as an asset. Real estate can certainly be an asset. Certain types of life insurance can be an asset. Mutual funds, small business ownership, 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, stocks, bonds, etc. All those things are assets. Even investing back in your human capital, maybe engaging our firm and making sure you're learning enough about your financial decisions before you make them. That could be an asset. Investing in coaching, investing in curriculum, master's degree, etc. Here's what's key. When those things have profit, when there's income off of them, we need to move that money back to the wealth coordination account. That money needs to come back and get deposited in the wealth coordination account. That deposit puts you in the position where you now have more money to deploy elsewhere to other assets. That's it. It's not highly complicated. It's just very different. I'm going to finish this in just a moment, right after this quick pause. Hey, everyone. I want to let you know I'm interrupting this podcast for a good reason. If you're someone who's enjoying this podcast, if our philosophy is helping you better think about money, then this offer is for you. We've opened up a financial inquiry call for our listeners of Sound Financial Bites. Our financial inquiry call is 15 minutes where one of our team will ask you some key questions, understand your concerns, and if appropriate, schedule you for a philosophy conversation with myself or Sound Financial Group's president, Corey Shepard. If you email us at info@sfgwa.com with inquiry in the subject, we will reply back to you with a link to our team calendar so you can schedule a call at a time that's least invasive for you. Even if we're not a fit, the team member having the call with you will point you in the direction of resources we have that can help you in whatever the next step for you in your financial journey is. Now back to your podcast already in progress. Welcome back, everybody. So glad we could pause for that, only because I want you guys to know that you're able to reach out. If you're listening to this podcast, you're on that search like I talked about earlier. What do I do? Don't give up. There's help out there that can be of help to you. It might be us. We're happy to have that conversation with you. We just finished talking about the fact that when we acquire assets, the wealth coordination account needs to be the place that our money goes back to. It needs to be a repository, because what happens otherwise? What happens otherwise is our money tends to get lost in the sauce of life. If we don't have something like a wealth coordination account that's there to catch any of the outstanding assets that we have that could go back to acquire other assets. So any profits that we have, if we don't direct them back to acquire more assets, they will get lost in the sauce of life. I just completed a conversation with a client, and this same kind of thing might apply to you. What a lot of people don't realize is they get about, even as an executive, it's more than this for business owners, but as an executive, if you are working, and once you make this year over about $128,000, you're no longer having to pay into Social Security beyond that number, which gives you about an extra 6.5% in every single paycheck from that point forward. So easy math, if you make about $260,000 a year, that means halfway through the year, you're no longer paying that 6.5%. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but if you're making $30,000 a month, that's $1,800 a month for about 7 months of the year that you could put somewhere. And having something like a wealth coordination account is a way that when you know you hit that, you just increase your contribution each month to your wealth coordination account to capture that for future asset acquisition. That is such a big deal because most of you listening right now, if you're up in those income ranges, now this is per spouse, but once you clear $128,000 a year, you stop paying into Social Security. And that's an example of where money just gets lost in the sauce of life. Now, this is the key. We've talked before on the podcast about why it is most people don't want to work toward retirement. Meaning, if you think about it for a moment, the cognitive dissonance, no wonder people don't like planning for it, because you're literally, think about it for a moment, the idea of retiring, which that word retirement didn't come into vogue until about 1937 with Social Security when we copied that from Germany at that time. Now, we used to use the word retirement in our American lexicon, but it was about what you did with a piece of equipment that was on the farm or in a factory, or an old coat gets retired. It wasn't about people. In fact, if you study our American history in the 1700s, 1800s, what was it? Those people, those most senior people, the people with the greatest amount of knowledge and networks, what did we do? We wanted them as a part of our business. We didn't want them out. We wanted them deeply connected to those of us still working. So let's think about that for a moment. Does that, do you want to work really, really hard, put in years and years and years of service in your particular industry? As a business owner, you might be building an identity, growing employees. You've built huge networks and deep, deep knowledge of what you do. Also, you cannot do it one day. We're going to excel if you're in the top 1% income earners. You, by very definition, are excelling at what you do. And you're doing it so well and getting expert at it so you can stop doing it. No wonder people aren't planning for quote unquote retirement. That's why we want to change that conversation for you. Just like we're changing the conversation around a quote unquote savings account, still appropriate for your emergency funds, not appropriate for the asset acquisition you have to do to give yourself a work optional lifestyle one day. So let's jump to that so you can see how the cash flows change once we have enough passive income. Okay. That's where we're going to focus now, is over here on the passive income side. We just finished talking about how you can acquire assets. Assets are something that put money in your pocket now or could put money in your pocket in the future without changing your lifestyle. What happens when this person has more money? Well, let's just look at when their passive income for this couple is over $320,000 a year. Now, they're making $400,000 and they're acquiring assets at the rate of $80,000 per year. That's a 20%, quote unquote, like what you might call a savings rate. I like to call it our asset acquisition rate. But we're setting aside 20% to assets. That means this household has about $320,000 of total expenses somewhere, taxes, mortgage, whatever it is. Once that passive income excels over $320,000, they haven't reached what you would refer to as retirement, but rather we've reached what we call DFI, or definite financial independence. Not retirement, DFI, definite financial independence. That's when our passive income is enough to pay all of our bills. That's when you've reached what we call the work optional lifestyle, but you're still working. You might still be working because you own the business and you love it. You might change the nature of the business. Maybe you hire a CEO to run it and now you're just the chairman. Whatever it is that you choose, here's the big deal. Literally, you can save 100% of the money you make now. 100%. Not a 20% savings rate anymore, because if we can live off of the passive income, then you could take every bit of money that's earned that you have to work for, that your business kicks off or that your career kicks off in your paycheck, and set aside 100% of that to the wealth coordination account. And over time, follow the flow of money. If this family is now setting aside $400,000 a year to the wealth coordination account, they are going to have to find the assets to be able to put that money into. And then it will increase over time their passive income. And that's where they get all their future pay raises from. That's where they can expand their lifestyle from, giving them the opportunity to still enjoy a better life over time without having to go to the office, without having to work, without having to take the same kind of risk they were taking before. That is what we want for all of our clients. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not working with us, that is okay. But what I do want you to be able to do with your existing advisor, your existing advisory team, is take the time to set up a wealth coordination account so that you are where the buck stops. Now, if you've got a whole life insurance premiums you're paying, just change them to come out of the wealth coordination account. That is an asset. If you have regular mutual fund or IRA contributions, just shift them with your existing advisory team to have them come out of the wealth coordination account so that you are the one who is at the switch of how much money is getting set aside for assets each year. That is the key. You want to be in control. Think about it one more time for a moment. If you can picture this, aside from listening to this podcast, perhaps, how often do you really stop to say, oh, I really need to do some assessments about my long-term financial future? Unfortunately, people do not do that often enough. In part because we don't have to look at everything. We don't have to think about the future until that future point in time. What I want you to be thinking about once a month is you're taking active action, taking money, putting it in the wealth coordination account. You're watching it grow, watching it build. What that does, remember, we started this with the idea of saving and budgeting and how that has our asset growth be residual instead of catalytic. Now what's happening? Not only is it catalytic in the actual budgeting process that we live off of what is left, but this is key. What's also happening is that in our mind, in our priority, we're actually thinking about long-term wealth building at least once a month when money goes into the wealth coordination account. At least once a month when we look at that statement. At least once a month when we look at all of our accounts as we're paying our bills. And there's that one labeled wealth coordination account that we realize has to go buy assets. And then we begin scanning our environment for the very assets that we want to acquire. And this is how we've seen our clients. We just met with a client the other day who did a first deed of trust. They're lending for somebody else to be able to acquire and flip a property. And that is the kind of thing that becomes available. We were not involved in that. We didn't do anything with it. You want to judge that based upon your own individual circumstances. But this client pulled the trigger literally because we had an account set aside for them that was just for asset acquisition. An opportunity presented itself. And without dipping into the family's emergency funds, they had a pool of capital they could pull from, immediately pivot, and take action. That's what we want for you. We want you at the center of all your financial decisions. And what I want to talk about in our next podcast, I'm going to give you a little preview of it. And that is that where we want you to be responsible. And frankly, I think if you really pause and reflect on it, what you might want for you is to be your own fiduciary. There's a lot of talk right now in the marketplace about what it means to be a fiduciary, why it's important to have an advisor that's a fiduciary. We are one, and you should be your own fiduciary. So that's coming up in the next podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. We hope you take away the ability to get a wealth coordination account. That what you can do from today's podcast is you can go to WCA for wealth coordination account.sfgwa.com. That's WCA for wealth coordination account.sfgwa.com. And there's going to be a page there where you can download. We will email you this actual PowerPoint in PDF so that you can review this on your own. You can review it with your spouse. I would encourage you, the two of you, to just sit and listen to this together, because this centerpiece could change the way you view financial advertising, what's going on with your money and how it's growing, and even your own consumption and spending, because now it becomes an item you can get excited about in growing your net worth on a consistent, ongoing basis going forward. I'm so glad you could join us today, and I hope that this has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life.